The distress beacon cut through the silence of the observation deck like a knife. Lieutenant Sarah Chen looked up from her datapad, her dark eyes narrowing as the emergency alert flashed across every screen in the room. The other crew members of the research vessel Pathfinder scrambled to their stations, but Sarah was already moving toward the communications console. "Unknown vessel detected," the automated voice announced. "Life signs minimal, hull integrity compromised." Captain Reynolds appeared on the main screen, his weathered face tight with concern. "Chen, you're closest to those coordinates. Take the scout ship and investigate. Could be pirates, could be refugees. Either way, we need to know what we're dealing with." Sarah nodded and grabbed her emergency kit. Within minutes, she was strapped into the small scout vessel, punching coordinates into the navigation system. The wreckage floated in the darkness ahead, spinning slowly in the void. It was a civilian transport, Vryn design by the look of it. The hull had been torn open in several places, and debris formed a small cloud around the dying ship. She maneuvered carefully through the wreckage, her scanners picking up the faint life sign deep within the vessel. Only one. Sarah docked with what remained of the airlock and cycled through, her suit systems compensating for the minimal atmosphere. The interior was a disaster. Bodies floated in the corridors, frozen in their final moments. Vryn civilians, by the look of them, their fur matted with ice crystals and blood. The life sign was coming from what had been the cargo hold. Sarah pushed through the twisted metal, using her suit's cutting torch to clear a path. When she finally reached the source, her breath caught in her throat. A Vryn cub huddled in the corner, wrapped in thermal blankets that were rapidly losing their effectiveness. The child couldn't have been more than 5 standard years old, her orange and white fur standing on end with fear. Her large golden eyes were wide with terror, and she was making a sound that Sarah had never heard before, but somehow understood immediately. The universal sound of a frightened child crying. "Hey there, little one," Sarah said softly, moving slowly so as not to startle the cub. "My name is Sarah. I'm here to help you." The cub pressed herself harder against the wall, her small body trembling. Sarah noticed the bodies nearby, likely the cub's parents, positioned as if they had died trying to shield their child from whatever had torn through the ship. Pirates, probably. They had taken what they wanted and left the rest to die in the cold vacuum of space. Sarah sat down on the floor, making herself smaller and less threatening. She removed her helmet slowly, letting the cub see her face. The air was thin and cold, but breathable enough for a short time. "I know you're scared. I know everything is terrible right now, but I promise you, I'm going to get you somewhere safe." The cub continued to cry, those heartbreaking sounds echoing through the ruined cargo hold. Sarah didn't try to move closer. Instead, she opened her emergency kit and pulled out a thermal unit, activating it and setting it between them. The warmth began to spread immediately, and Sarah saw the cub's ears twitch toward the heat source. "Are you cold?" Sarah asked gently. "This will help. And I have food too, if you're hungry. Real food. Not that emergency ration stuff." The cub didn't respond, but her crying had quieted to soft whimpers. Sarah slowly pulled out a protein bar and broke off a piece, eating it herself to show it was safe. Then she placed several more bars on the floor near the thermal unit. "Whenever you're ready," Sarah said. "No rush. We have time." She knew that wasn't entirely true. The ship's life support was failing, and they needed to evacuate soon. But forcing the traumatized child would only make things worse. Sarah had grown up with younger siblings. She understood that sometimes the best thing you could do was simply be present. Sarah began talking, keeping her voice low and soothing. She told the cub about the Pathfinder, about her own childhood on Earth, about the stars they could see from her homeworld. She talked about her cat, Mr. Whiskers, who was terrible at catching mice, but excellent at napping in sunbeams. She talked about anything and everything, filling the silence with human warmth. Slowly, Gradually, the cub's trembling began to ease. Her large eyes stayed fixed on Sarah, watching every movement. But the absolute terror had faded to cautious observation. When Sarah shifted position, the cub flinched but didn't try to flee. "I lost my grandmother when I was about your age," Sarah said quietly. "She was my favorite person in the whole world. When she died, I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just wanted to hide in my room and pretend nothing had changed." Sarah's eyes grew distant with the memory. "But my mom, she would sit outside my door every night. She didn't try to come in. She didn't force me to talk. She just sat there, so I knew I wasn't alone." The cub made a small sound, not quite a word, but almost a question. Sarah smiled gently. "Yeah, exactly like that. Sometimes the best thing someone can do is just be there with you in the darkness." Sarah noticed the cub's eyes drifting to the thermal unit and the food. The child was clearly cold and hungry, but still too frightened to move closer. Sarah slowly stood up, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. She moved away from the thermal unit, giving the cub clear access to it. "I'm going to check on something over here," Sarah said, turning her back to give the child some privacy. "You do whatever you need to do." She heard the soft sound of movement behind her, the rustle of blankets and the quiet patting of small feet. When Sarah glanced back carefully, the cub had moved to the thermal unit and was clutching a protein bar, eating it in quick, desperate bites. Sarah pretended not to notice, busying herself with her equipment. The ship groaned around them, a reminder that time was running short. Sarah activated her communicator, keeping her voice low. "Pathfinder, this is Chen. I've located the survivor. It's a Vryn juvenile, approximately 5 years old. She's traumatized but stable. Requesting medical team on standby and a xenopsychologist if available." Captain Reynolds's voice crackled back. "Copy that, Chen. But you need to evacuate that wreck soon. Life support is critical." "Understood, Captain. Working on it." Sarah closed the channel and turned back to the cub. The child had finished eating and was now curled up next to the thermal unit, her golden eyes still fixed on Sarah. "We need to leave soon," Sarah said gently. "This ship is dying, and we need to get you somewhere warm and safe. I have a ship docked nearby. It's small but comfortable, and from there we can get to my big ship, which has medical facilities and lots of people who want to help you." The cub's ears flattened against her head, and she made a distressed sound. Sarah understood. This wreck was all she had left of her family, her home. Leaving it meant accepting that they were truly gone. Sarah moved slowly back toward the cub and sat down again, this time a bit closer. "I know it's hard. I know you don't want to leave them. But they would want you to be safe, wouldn't they? They protected you with their last breath because they loved you and wanted you to live." Tears formed in the cub's large eyes, rolling down her furry cheeks. Sarah felt her own eyes growing wet. She reached out slowly, her hand open and palm up, offering without demanding. "Will you let me help you? Please?" For a long moment, the cub just stared at Sarah's outstretched hand. Then, so slowly Sarah could barely see the movement, the small child reached out one trembling paw and touched Sarah's fingers. The contact was brief, barely a second, but it was enough. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "You're so brave. Braver than you know." Over the next hour, Sarah worked carefully to prepare the cub for the journey to the scout ship. She found an intact environmental suit in the wreckage, sized for Vryn children, and gently helped the cub into it. The child allowed the contact, though she trembled throughout the process. Sarah talked constantly, explaining each step, never making sudden movements. When it came time to leave the cargo hold, the cub balked at the doorway, looking back at the bodies of her parents. Sarah knelt beside her. "Would you like to say goodbye?" The cub made a small, keening sound and pressed against Sarah's side. Sarah wrapped an arm around the small shoulders, holding the child as she grieved. She didn't rush her, Didn't tell her it would be okay. Didn't offer empty platitudes. She just held her and let her cry. Finally, the cub pulled away and took one last long look at her family. Then she turned and pressed her face against Sarah's suit, unable to watch as they left the cargo hold behind. Sarah carried her through the wreckage, shielding her from the sight of the other bodies, and into the scout ship. Once aboard, Sarah removed both their helmets and cranked the heat up high. The cub sat in the co-pilot's seat, looking small and lost among the human-sized equipment. Sarah wrapped her in more thermal blankets and secured her safely for the short journey back to the Pathfinder. "Almost there," Sarah said as she piloted them away from the wreckage. "The Pathfinder is a good ship, and the crew are good people. Dr. Morrison is our chief medical officer. She's Vryn, actually, so you'll be able to talk to her in your own language." The cub's ears perked up slightly at that. Sarah smiled. "Yeah, I thought you'd like that. And we have this amazing chef named Carlos who can make food from any planet taste incredible. Even the weird stuff." As they approached the Pathfinder, Sarah noticed the cub's eyes growing heavy. The adrenaline and fear that had kept her alert were finally wearing off, leaving only exhaustion behind. Sarah landed the scout ship smoothly and opened the comm channel. "Pathfinder, we're docked. Medical team, please meet me in Bay 3, but keep it low-key. No crowds, no loud noises. This little one has been through enough." Dr. Morrison was waiting when Sarah emerged from the scout ship, carrying the drowsy cub. The Vryn doctor's face showed immediate compassion and understanding. She spoke softly in the clicking, purring language of the Vryn people, and the cub's ears rotated toward her voice with interest and relief. But when Dr. Morrison reached out to take the child, the cub whimpered and clung tighter to Sarah's neck. Sarah felt the small body trembling again and adjusted her hold, making soothing sounds. "It's okay," Dr. Morrison said in accented but clear standard. "Let her stay with you for now. She's imprinted on you as her safe person. Perfectly normal response to trauma. I'll do my examination while you hold her, if that's acceptable." Sarah nodded and carried the cub to the medical bay. The examination was quick and gentle, Dr. Morrison working carefully to minimize the child's distress. Physically, the cub was unharmed aside from mild hypothermia and dehydration. Psychologically was another matter entirely. "She hasn't spoken at all?" Dr. Morrison asked quietly, her medical scanner humming softly. "Not a word," Sarah confirmed. "Just sounds. Crying, whimpering, that sort of thing. Shock, likely. Her name is Kessa, according to the ship's passenger manifest. Her parents were Torvin and Sheila, merchants traveling from Vryn Prime to the trade station at Kepler 7. The ship was attacked 3 days ago." Dr. Morrison's expression darkened. "Pirates. They took the cargo and left everyone to die." Sarah felt anger flare in her chest, but tamped it down. Getting angry wouldn't help Kessa. "What happens to her now?" "We'll contact the Vryn embassy. They'll locate her remaining family and arrange for custody. In the meantime, she stays with us." Dr. Morrison looked at how tightly Kessa clung to Sarah. "Specifically, it seems she stays with you." Sarah looked down at the exhausted cub in her arms. "I'm just a lieutenant. I don't know anything about taking care of children, especially Vryn children." "You know enough," Dr. Morrison said with a gentle smile. "You saved her life and earned her trust. That's what matters most right now. I'll provide you with information on Vryn dietary needs and customs, and I'm available anytime you need support. But honestly, Lieutenant, you're doing exactly what she needs." Over the next several hours, Sarah learned more about Vryn children than she ever expected. Dr. Morrison set her up with a small cabin adjacent to her own quarters, filled with soft materials and warm lighting that would feel comforting to a Vryn child. The temperature was set higher than standard human comfort levels, and the food synthesizer was programmed with appropriate Vryn meals. Kessa remained silent throughout, her golden eyes watching everything with cautious attention. She wouldn't let Sarah put her down. clinging with surprising strength whenever Sarah tried to set her in a chair or on the soft sleeping nest Dr. Morrison had provided. "It's okay," Sarah murmured, giving up and simply holding the child. "I've got you. I'm not going anywhere." As ship's night cycle approached, Sarah found herself exhausted but unable to rest. Kessa was finally showing signs of sleepiness, her eyelids drooping and her grip loosening slightly. But every time Sarah tried to lay her down in the sleeping nest, the cub would wake with a start and cry out in distress. Sarah tried everything. She sang lullabies from her own childhood, though she doubted Kessa understood the words. She told more stories about Earth, about her family, about anything she could think of. She even tried simply sitting in silence, hoping the quiet would soothe the frightened child. Finally, in desperation, Sarah made a decision. She climbed into the sleeping nest herself, still holding Kessa, and arranged the blankets around them both. It was designed for someone larger than a human, so there was plenty of room. The nest was surprisingly comfortable, with a gentle warmth that seemed to radiate from the materials themselves. "Is this better?" Sarah asked softly, adjusting her position so both of them were comfortable. "We'll sleep together, okay? That way you know I'm right here if you need me." Kessa made a small sound, not quite a word, but carrying a tone of relief. She burrowed deeper into Sarah's embrace, her small body finally beginning to relax. Sarah felt the tension slowly draining from the child's muscles as exhaustion finally overcame fear. Sarah stroked the soft fur between Kessa's ears, the way she used to pet Mr. Whiskers when he was anxious. The cub's purring response suggested it was the right instinct. Gradually, Kessa's breathing deepened and slowed, falling into the rhythm of sleep. But Sarah couldn't sleep yet. She lay awake in the dim light, holding this small life that had been so violently torn from everything she knew. Sarah thought about her own family, safe on Earth, and felt a wave of gratitude mixed with sorrow for the child in her arms who had lost everything. The ship was quiet during night cycle, just the gentle hum of life support and the distant sounds of essential crew moving through the corridors. Sarah listened to Kessa's soft breathing and felt the small heartbeat against her chest. She thought about the pirates who had done this, who had murdered innocent people for profit, and felt a cold fury settle in her bones. But that was for later. Right now, her job was simpler and more important. Keep this child safe. Help her survive the night. Give her a reason to believe that not everything in the universe was cruel and cold. Sarah must have dozed off eventually because she woke to the sound of Kessa whimpering. The cub was still asleep but caught in a nightmare, her small body twitching and her breathing rapid. Sarah held her closer and whispered soothing sounds, and gradually Kessa settled back into peaceful sleep. This pattern repeated several times through the night. Each time Kessa showed signs of distress, Sarah was there to comfort her, to remind her without words that she was safe and protected. By the time artificial dawn began to brighten the cabin, Sarah was exhausted but satisfied. Kessa had made it through the night. As the lights gradually increased, mimicking a natural sunrise, Sarah felt Kessa beginning to stir. The cub's eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused for a moment. Then she seemed to remember where she was and who was holding her, and her body tensed. "Good morning, Kessa," Sarah said gently, using the cub's name for the first time. "You're safe. You're on the Pathfinder, and I'm right here with you." Kessa looked up at Sarah's face, those large golden eyes searching for something. Then so quietly Sarah almost missed it, the cub spoke her first words since the attack. "Stay?" It was barely a whisper, in heavily accented standard, but it was unmistakably a question, a plea. Sarah felt her heart break and mend simultaneously. "Yes," Sarah promised, holding the small body closer. "I'll stay. As long as you need me, I'll stay." Kessa was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she did something that surprised Sarah completely. The cub reached up with one small paw and very deliberately placed it in Sarah's hand, holding on with gentle but firm pressure. Sarah closed her fingers around the small paw, feeling the trust and hope in that simple gesture. "That's right," she whispered. "I've got you, little one, and I'm not letting go." As dawn light filled the cabin, Lieutenant Sarah Chen sat with a Vryn cub sleeping softly while holding her hand and realized that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or their technology. It was in their stubborn refusal to let anyone suffer alone in the darkness, their willingness to sit beside the frightened and the broken until dawn came again. The universe was vast and often cruel, but in that small cabin on a research vessel drifting through the stars, a human and a Vryn child proved that sometimes the simple act of holding someone's hand through the night was the most powerful force in the galaxy.